That street harassment, that sort of attention, that unwanted attention, is not really about attraction or paying someone a compliment or thinking someone is beautiful or wanting to be with someone. It's about terrorizing them, right? And younger people, girls, are easier to terrorize.
And that's exactly why we need to be talking to girls about this at a young age. So go watch that video and then the follow-up video. And I actually wrote about this. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Those videos, one of the reasons why men target such young girls, right? Like 12-year-olds, 15, just like people in those comment section. I think I got more unwanted attention at 13, 14, 15 than I ever did in my 20s. Look at my dog, by the way. Oh my God. Good. I do think that this country, what are you doing? I think in the U.S., because of purity culture, there's a direct link between purity culture and how many PEDOs there are. I do think a lot of men are legit attracted to teenage girls and 12-year-olds. And corn certainly doesn't help with that. But I also think that a lot of it is because they know younger women don't know what to do. They don't have as much experience dealing with terrible men. They're new to it. They don't have as many weapons. They don't necessarily have as much confidence because they don't have as much experience dealing with this. And especially if they come from homes where they don't have parents who, I don't know, teach them things, talk about things openly, instill confidence in them. Or, if these parents are, just straight up abusing them themselves, these girls are such easy targets. And I know this because I was one of those girls. So when the Me Too movement hit Hollywood and then became into like mainstream, which by the way, was stolen from a black woman. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google her. She's an activist, like super quick Google search. This is literally the first thing that comes up. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is the founder of it. And before it was, appropriated by white women like we do with everything. Anyway, so during that moment, I wrote this for the Washington Post. It is probably behind a paywall. I'm not sure. I think you can read a few per month for free. And the reason why I wrote that is because I was so upset when I saw my stepmom's post on Facebook. She told these horrifying Me Too stories that she never told me. Nobody prepared me for just how much I would be harassed, followed, how many old men would have asked me to give me a ride from the bus stop. There's one. The old guy, Scott, my best friend at church. Like, I was targeted so much just as a child and then as a teenager and then well into adulthood. And I'm not blaming this on the women for not informing me. But what I am saying, and the reason why I wrote that article, is not talking about this stuff with our daughters and our nieces puts them in so much danger. I think that it's already improved, right? Because we've already opened up this conversation. But I want to share some of the research that I found while doing that reporting. I just realized that I am sitting on the ground and my dog has the couch. Toxic boy, dog mom. Now, one of the reasons why I didn't tell my mom or my stepmom is because I assumed that, first of all, that I was the only person this thing ever happened to. That they wouldn't be able to relate, that it was maybe my fault. Why would I think all those things? Because they hadn't told me that they had experienced it too. And also because, abusers tend to use some sort of tactic like, don't tell your mom, or don't tell about it, right? So because I didn't have any of this information, because no one told me, hey, come talk to me if a man does anything to you. Or, hey, men and are gonna say things, you know what I mean? Nobody prepared me. And that's why so many of us have all these stories, is because we didn't know this was like a thing. We didn't know that this was super common until we were on the receiving end of it. And then we're like, oh my God. And because they coded it, right? So I talk about how they told me to not, get too drunk, but they didn't tell me what my friends were gonna do to me. They didn't tell me I was gonna wake up in a cow field completely wasted with one of my best friends on top of me, unzipping his pants, ready to go. They told me about grape, but they didn't tell me that it'd be my boyfriend who did it. They didn't tell me that my home was actually the most dangerous place for me, and that men I knew were the most dangerous men in my life. There is stranger danger. But other than the man who picked me up at the bus stop, all the men, whether it was my babysitter's drug addict son who lived in the basement, or my best friend Scott, who was in his 30s at church, who then one day disappeared. For no reason. We never knew why. I looked him up the other day. He's actually married to a young woman with daughters. Nobody told me that the first man I ever fell in love with at the age of 36 would be the first person who violently raped me. Nobody told me that. They just told me, I was told to dress modestly. when I was a tomboy. I lived with a bunch of dudes in college, and I was warned to not, prance around in a nightgown. And I'm like, I don't even have a nightgown. What are you talking about? I wear like sweatpants. I'm not wearing like a little Victoria's Secret nightie. Because most of my guy friends thought of me as like a dude. That they didn't tell me that my guy friends were the ones who were going to schmegely harass me at work and draw, the D in permanent marker on the back of my calves after they found out I was screwing another company, another RAF guy. I just went back and read this article for the first time in years. I can't believe that I was so brutally honest about my dad. So the only one who warned me about men was my dad. He told me, he's always like, they're just a bunch of grapists and, unalivers. But he was also the man who called me and my sister schmegs workers all the time as a little joke. And who would make jokes about how we can't go to the Virgin Islands. I mean, my sister was like 12 when he made that joke to her. Now, I interviewed several women, and one of the women, she didn't tell her dad because she was afraid of what he was going to do, right? This is another reason why we can't tell men about stuff, because they make it all about themselves and they protect their stuff, right? It's not about protection. It's about revenge. It's about domination. It's about, don't you touch my property. Because if they're really protecting us, they would ask us what we need. They would take into consideration, sometimes we don't need them to go violently do some stuff. You know what I mean? Real protection actually takes into account the consequences that the victim is going to experience if you go, do some BS, right? So many dads don't care about the outcome of their actions, if they do anything at all, if they believe us at all. So yeah, we're not going to tell them. Then a lot of women like her aren't going to tell their mothers because they don't want their mothers telling their dads. And then there's also this. When my stepmom did try to tell me about the grape attempt from one of her friends, I remember, I was like, 30 something, sitting on the couch, and I couldn't believe she was telling this story. I couldn't believe she was being so vulnerable and opening up with me about this. But my dad was there, and guess what he had to say? Why were you there anyway? He started victim blaming her, and I got so mad. I was like, what? And basically her and I, like, it just the whole conversation shut down. If you know that your father, your own father, won't believe you or will blame you, why would you tell him? And then why would you tell your mom or your stepmom or anybody about anything that happened to you? Because they're probably going to tell him. So a lot of women won't tell even the women in their lives that they trust because of the consequences that men are going to put on them. There's also a generational gap too. My stepmom, when she was one of the first women at her office, she's a brilliant woman and worked her way up into a very high position at her company. But while she was on her way up, her boss made her take a bunch of clients to a strip club. And and this is why it's really important to talk to women older than us, because, there was no HR to go to. She said that, when she was out there entering the workforce with all these men, all these powerful men, you were on your own. Now, she's a white woman, so it's going to be even worse for Black, Indigenous, and other women of color. But no one was there to help her. There's no one going to help her. I mean, there's probably barely anyone to help now, but at least it's a little different. And as she reminded me, saying no could have cost me my job. It just wasn't an option. So women like my stepmom had to take men to strip clubs as part of her job. She was high level, an accountant, and that's what her boss made her do. Then I entered this other woman and her mother, and her mother had told her everything. She gave such a great interview, and she's like, I didn't want my daughter to experience any of this stuff. And her daughter says that she thinks that her mom telling her all that stuff is one of the reasons why she didn't blindly walk into situations like a lot of her friends did. Because she knew and this is why I make my content, y'all. I don't hate men, I love men. But having been on the receiving end of so much of their violence, I want women talking about this because I want women knowing what they're capable of. I give them the benefits of the doubt. And women like this set their daughters up to not give men the benefit of the doubt. Her mom told her that she had been gang raped and all kinds of other awful things, tragic things. And she says, I thought telling her might keep her from blaming herself like I had, because her own mother had not prepared her. And I interviewed this woman who had written a book about this. And this final hurdle is women's shame, mother's shame. She said, our cultures still hold mothers accountable for all of humanity's problems. And so they blame themselves for everything that happens to their kids. And also, by admitting what could happen to their daughters, a lot of times it means they're going to have to admit what happened to them. And a lot of them are not ready to do that. Their own trauma and their own shame stands in the way. But if you really want to protect your daughter, gotta tell them the truth.